My name is Margaret Hale, and I never thought the worst wound my heart would carry would come wrapped in a bow the color of Christmas. On that December evening, I stood at the window of my son's home while the whole family spilled onto the snowy driveway, voices buzzing like a hive. Daniel, my only child, carried a set of keys in his palm the way a priest carries a chalice. He grinned, lifted them high, and dangled them before Clara, his wife's mother, as though he were bestowing a crown. Behind him, parked under the porch light, gleamed a brand new Lexus SUV, a crimson bow stretched across its hood like a banner of triumph. Everyone clapped, cameras flashed, laughter cracked the air open. And in that moment, I felt my chest go hollow. When my turn came, Daniel reached into his pocket and pressed a small white envelope into my hand. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he said, smiling a little too brightly, as if the words had been rehearsed. I opened it. Inside lay 3 crumpled $1 bills and a card with a printed nativity scene. No message in his handwriting. No thought. Just paper and numbers. My fingers tightened around it, and I forced my mouth into something shaped like gratitude. I have learned over 70 years how to make pain polite. I whispered thank you and slipped the money into my sweater pocket, though the bills burned hotter than any fireplace ember. The cold December air wrapped around my shoulders as I followed everyone back inside. Clara looped her arm through Daniel's, kissed his cheek with a flourish, and whispered something that made him chuckle. Anna, my daughter-in-law, dabbed tears from her eyes while her cousin filmed the scene on his phone. I carried the tray of gingerbread cookies to the living room, my hands steady, though my heart rattled like a loose window pane in a storm. The grandchildren clambered around the tree, candy canes dangling from their mouths like little red-white pendants. The television played football highlights, and the room smelled of pine and cinnamon. To anyone else, it was a perfect family Christmas. To me, it felt like standing outside my own life, face pressed against the glass. I told myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Daniel had a larger gift waiting in the wings, something meaningful he would unveil when the crowd thinned. Maybe the money was meant as a playful joke, a nod to the lean years when we counted every penny together. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe I had not raised a man who would treat his mother like an afterthought while showering luxury on someone who had walked into our lives only a few years before. But the ache in my chest told me the truth. This was not a mistake. It was a hierarchy, and I had been placed at the bottom. I bent to gather a scarf that had slipped from a chair. As I straightened, my hand brushed the edge of Clara's handbag resting open by the tree. A corner of paper jutted out, stiff and official. For a breath, I considered pushing it back inside and walking away. But the universe has a cruel way of forcing our eyes open when we most want to shut them. The paper bore my address in bold letters, the ink black and merciless. In that instant, the laughter outside became muffled, as though I were underwater. My pulse quickened, my throat tightened, and I knew this night was not just about humiliation. Something deeper was unfolding, something that could steal more than dignity. It could take the very ground beneath my feet. I held my breath, tucked the scarf under my arm, and told myself the truth. Christmas had just become a battlefield, and I was not ready to surrender. The house was buzzing like a hive when I carried the empty cookie tray back to the kitchen. The sound of voices and clinking glasses covered my steps, so no one noticed when I drifted toward the living room again. Clara's handbag still sat by the tree, mouth half open like it was waiting for me. I told myself not to be foolish, not to behave like some jealous old woman snooping in another's purse. But the corner of that document kept tugging at me. I reached down, slid it out far enough to read a single line, and my stomach turned. Appraisal report. Property, 14 Willow Lane. Owner, Margaret Hale. Market value, $520,000. My hands went cold. This was my house, the one I had worked 30 years to pay off, the one my husband painted with his own hands until the wood shone like honey. I hadn't ordered any appraisal. I hadn't signed a thing. My pulse thudded in my ears, and for a moment I thought I might faint right there under the twinkling Christmas lights. I pushed the paper back, but more pages slid out, copies of my deed, legal forms clipped together, and a power of attorney with my name printed at the top. My eyes caught on the signature line. Someone had tried to imitate my handwriting, but the loops were stiff, the rhythm wrong. It looked like me only the way a mask looks like a face. My knees locked. If I hadn't been gripping the couch, I might have collapsed. Maggie, we're taking more pictures out front. Clara's voice floated from the porch. She sounded like a queen announcing her parade. I stuffed the papers back into the bag, making sure everything lay exactly as I had found it. Then I followed the noise, pasted a smile on my lips, and watched Daniel hold the car door open for Clara while neighbors slowed their cars to gape at the gleaming Lexus. I clapped when others clapped. I laughed when someone joked about the bow. But inside, fury coiled tight. I thought of all the nights I stayed awake sewing until my eyes burned, saving for Daniel's college so he wouldn't graduate in debt. I thought of the lunches skipped, the winters with the thermostat turned down, the shoes I resoled instead of replacing, and now, standing in the snow, I felt the sharp edge of betrayal slice through every sacrifice. Back inside, I busied myself with the grandchildren, tucking blankets around their shoulders as they watched a cartoon marathon. Daniel passed through the room, cheeks flushed from the cold, and bent to kiss my hair. "You doing okay, Mom?" he asked, his eyes already sliding away, guilty, distracted. "I'm fine," I said, though my throat ached. By 10 o'clock, the party wound down. Guests bundled themselves in coats, carrying leftovers in plastic containers. Clara hugged me at the door, perfume clinging like smoke, and whispered, "We'll talk about the house after the holiday, dear." My blood iced over. I nodded as though she had complimented the pie. When the last car disappeared into the night, I locked the door and leaned against it, the silence of my home pressing in. I pulled the $3 from my pocket and set them on the kitchen counter beside a chip of red plastic that had clung to my glove, one flake from the enormous bow. Evidence, I thought, not just of a slight, but of a scheme. At 10:37, the phone rang. The township police asked if I'd seen a woman named Clara Whitaker, reported missing 2 nights earlier by her son. Last known location, the Golden Lantern Casino. My knees weakened. Missing? Casino? The words crashed against each other. "She was here tonight," I managed. "She left in a brand new car my son gave her." The officer thanked me, his tone brisk, and hung up. I stood alone in my kitchen, the rooster clock ticking on the wall, and realized the truth. This wasn't just humiliation. It was theft in motion, and I was the target. The next morning, the winter sun crept across my kitchen table, pale as old paper. I sat with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring at the 3 bills on the saucer as if they were some kind of omen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that forged signature, the fake notary stamp, Clara's smile as she whispered about the house. My chest tightened with the knowledge that I was not simply being pushed aside in my son's heart. I was being cornered in my own home. At 8:30, the phone rang. It was Mr. Kaplan, the attorney who had helped me finalize the deed years ago. His voice was gravelly, steady, a lifeline. I told him everything, the appraisal, the false power of attorney, Clara's words at the door, and the call from the police about her being reported missing. He told me to bring whatever I had and meet him within the hour. The drive across town felt longer than usual. Frost clung to the edges of the windshield, and the radio played carols that made my throat ache. By the time I climbed the stairs to his office, the bakery downstairs was filling the air with cinnamon, a scent too sweet for the bitterness in my chest. Kaplan spread the papers on his desk, adjusted his glasses, and studied the fake signature. "This is forgery," he said flatly, "and not a good one. If she tries to record this at the county office, they'll notice. But the intent is criminal." "So she's trying to take my house," I whispered. He leaned back, folding his hands. "It looks that way. The missing person report complicates things. If her own son is calling police, she's been lying to more than just you. I'll start paperwork to secure your title and block any transfer attempts. In the meantime, don't sign anything, and don't let anyone pressure you." I nodded, though my stomach churned. I don't want Daniel dragged into this. He's drowning in debt. She's using that to twist him. Kaplan's brow furrowed. "Then she's preying on both of you. That's what con artists do. They sniff out desperation and pride." On the way home, my phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. "Mom, can we come by later? Need to talk." The words sank like stones in my chest. I typed back, "I'll be here." I arrived before noon. The house felt too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards suspicious. I made tea and sat by the window, waiting. Clara's beige coat still haunted me, the smugness in her eyes as she mentioned selling the house. And now, with Daniel coming, I feared what kind of bargain he might already have made. When the doorbell finally rang, it wasn't Daniel. It was Clara herself, smiling as though the night before had been nothing more than a pleasant dinner. She stepped inside without waiting for me to invite her, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "I thought we could talk about your future," she said, laying her gloves on the table. "There's no need for you to worry over maintenance and bills. Let me help. A quick sale, a little investment guidance, and you'd never have to think about money again." Her voice was honey, but every word tasted like poison. I poured her coffee, set it on the table, and forced myself to sit across from her. My hands were steady, but inside I felt the edges of a storm forming. This time, I wasn't just a humiliated mother. I was a woman preparing for battle. Clara left after less than an hour, her perfume still clinging to the curtains like smoke after a fire. She had smiled until the end, promising she'd check back soon with paperwork ready, as if my signature were already hers to collect. When the door finally shut behind her, I sagged into the chair, the teacup trembling in my hands. I had just begun to breathe again when I heard tires crunching over the driveway. Through the frosted glass, I saw Daniel's car. He came in without knocking, his coat half zipped, his face pale under the winter sun. Anna trailed behind him, clutching a folder, her eyes darting everywhere but at me. They looked like children walking into the principal's office, nervous, ashamed. "Mom," Daniel began, rubbing the back of his neck. "We need to talk. About money." I set the teacup down carefully. "I figured as much." He glanced at Anna, then at the folder she held. "We're behind. Credit cards, the mortgage, the girls' tuition. I thought Clara said she could help." Anna finally spoke, her voice a whisper. "She said your house was the key, that if you sold it, leased it back, we could all breathe again. She said you'd still live there, but the equity would save us." I closed my eyes. The words were knives I'd already felt once before. When I opened them, Daniel looked smaller than he had on Christmas Eve, shoulders bent, hope slipping from him like sand through open fingers. "She's lying to you," I said. "That program is nothing but a scheme." I saw the papers in her bag. She forged my signature. "Daniel, she tried to claim my house already." He froze. "She what?" "I took them to Mr. Kaplan this morning. It's fraud, plain and simple. She's playing you both." Daniel sank into a chair, pressing his palms to his eyes. "God, what have I done?" His voice cracked, and for the first time since he was a boy, I saw tears in his eyes. I wanted to fix things. Anna kept saying the bills were piling up, and Clara made it sound so easy. I thought I was being smart, finally taking care of everyone. Instead, I handed her the rope to hang us with. Anna dropped the folder on the table. Inside were overdue statements, letters from creditors, warnings from the school about tuition. Every sheet was heavy with shame. She leaned against Daniel, tears sliding down her cheeks. We didn't know where else to turn. I reached across the table, covering Daniel's hand with mine. "You turn to me. That's what family is for. But we don't hand our lives to a woman who smiles at a casino table and forges documents in the dark. We fight back." He looked up, raw and desperate. "How?" A steadiness settled over me then, like an old quilt pulled around my shoulders. "We give her what she wants most, the promise of money, and when she reaches for it, we make sure she can't deny who she really is." Anna frowned. "You mean set her up?" "Not set her up," I corrected. "Expose her, with proof. Mr. Kaplan will help us build a record she can't escape. But we'll need Clara to show her hand. She has to believe she's already won." Daniel nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "If it keeps you safe, Mom, if it saves this house, I'll do whatever it takes." For the first time in days, my heart steadied. I saw in my son not the man who had humiliated me with $3, but the boy who once scraped ice from my windshield before school so I wouldn't have to. He had lost his way, yes, but he was not lost to me. As evening fell, we sat together around the kitchen table, 3 generations worth of debt and dignity spread out in papers between us. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant carolers. Inside, I began to plan the trap that would bring Clara's empire of lies crashing down. 2 nights later, we drove to Clara's house under a sky as sharp and clear as glass. The Lexus sat in her driveway like a prize on display, still wearing the traces of ribbon glue on its hood. My pulse thumped steady as I carried the manila folder Kaplan had prepared. Inside were copies of the forged power of attorney, the fraudulent appraisal, and photographs linking her to the casino. I had also tucked in a small recorder, already running inside my purse. Clara greeted us in silk and pearls, her smile wide enough to swallow the world. "Daniel, Anna, Margaret," she said, ushering us into the warm glow of her living room. "Come, sit. Let's talk about opportunity." She poured wine as if this were a celebration. Then she spread her own folder on the coffee table, charts, numbers, words like equity release and tax shelter. Her eyes glittered as she explained how simple it would be. I sell the house to a trust, lease it back, and invest the cash offshore. "Everyone wins," she promised. "Your children's future secured, Margaret relieved of responsibility, Daniel free of debt. But we must act quickly. Opportunities vanish if we hesitate." I let her talk, let her weave the web, while the recorder captured every word. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his hand clenched on his knee. Finally, I leaned forward, my voice calm but edged with steel. Clara, I said, sliding Kaplan's folder onto the table, you might want to explain these. Her smile faltered. She flipped the papers open, scanning the copies of the forged POA, the casino photos, the appraisal stamped with the wrong notary date. Her knuckles whitened as she turned each page. This is nothing, she stammered. Misunderstandings? Clerical errors? No, I said. It is fraud, and you just outlined your scheme on tape. I tapped my purse, every word preserved. Daniel's voice broke through, trembling but resolute. You lied to me. You said Mom agreed, that it was safe. You used my debt to manipulate me. Clara's eyes flashed with panic, then hardened into something cruel. You're a fool, she hissed. All of you. Do you think anyone will believe an old woman over me? That was when the knock came at the door. Clara froze. Daniel opened it to reveal 2 officers, Kaplan standing behind them. The lawyer's eyes met mine, steady, certain. The officers stepped inside, their presence filling the room with authority. Clara backed against the wall, her confidence crumbling. This is a mistake, she insisted, voice high and thin. But the officers were already reading her rights. As they led her out past the shining Lexus, I felt the weight on my chest lift. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I could breathe without pain. Clara's empire of lies had collapsed under its own glittering facade, and my home, my life, was safe again. The trial moved faster than I expected. With Kaplan's evidence, the forged documents, and the recording from Clara's living room, there was little room for denial. She pled guilty to forgery, fraud, and attempted theft, cutting a deal that landed her 3 years behind bars. Her Lexus was repossessed, her bank account seized, and the illusion of wealth she wore like a crown dissolved overnight. When the verdict was read, I sat in the back of the courtroom, hands folded in my lap. Clara's son Brian was there too, shoulders slumped, shame etched deep in his face. I had only spoken to him once, on the phone, when the police called about his missing mother. Now I felt a quiet kinship with him. We had both been betrayed by the same woman. As the bailiff led Clara away, she avoided my eyes. For the first time, she looked small. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and Anna came often. They brought the girls, who colored pictures at my kitchen table while their parents sifted through stacks of overdue bills. Together, we called creditors, arranged payment plans, and cut every unnecessary expense. Daniel sold his old car, picked up extra hours at work, and began to look more like the man I once knew. Steady, dependable, proud in the right ways. One evening, as the girls slept on the couch beneath quilts, Daniel turned to me, his eyes glistening. Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I let her put you in danger. I put you at the bottom when you should have been the foundation. I reached across the table, gripping his hand the way I had when he was a boy afraid of storms. You lost your way, but you found it again. That's what matters. I raised you to learn, not to be perfect. Anna wiped her eyes, whispering a thank you that trembled with relief. In that moment, the cracks between us began to seal. Spring came slowly, with crocuses pushing through the thawed earth by my porch. On a mild April afternoon, I sat on the swing with a cup of tea, the sound of children laughing in the yard. My house stood firm around me, its windows catching the light, its walls still carrying the scent of pine and thyme. I had defended it, defended myself, and in doing so, saved more than bricks and beams. I had saved my son from drowning in shame. That evening, I texted Brian. She will face her punishment, but I hope you carry lighter burdens. None of us get to choose our mothers, only the kind of children we decide to be. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I leaned back and let the quiet settle. For the first time in years, I felt not just safe, but whole. Clara had taken her shot and failed. Justice had been served. And in the ashes of her schemes, my family was finding its way home again. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.